Okay, 7. Good evening and welcome to the Women and Girls Fund virtual event, Sex, Suffrage, and Scandal, the Life and Times of Victoria Woodhull. I'm Fran Stoffer, your host for the evening, and on behalf of the Women and Girls Fund Executive Committee and the Northwest Connecticut Community Foundation, I want to thank you for your continued support. And if you're new to us tonight, thank you for your interest. Tonight's presentation is a celebration of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to those brave women who fought passionately to win the right to vote. And we encourage all of you to honor their accomplishment. If you have not yet done so, please vote in the presidential election. Before I turn you over to our speaker, I do want to assure you that we are still actively engaged in our mission to support women and girls in our area. Last year, we supported manufacturing, women in manufacturing and financial independence, and we still care very much about those issues. But because of the pandemic, we have refocused our energies so that we can address the greatest need, childcare and healthcare. We can only do that because of your generous donations. So thank you. To learn more about the Women and Girls Fund, please visit us at our website, northwestcf.org/women and girls. We miss seeing you, and we promise that we will return to our usual events once it's safe to do so. In the meantime, we thought it would be fun to retain one of the features of our fall fundraisers. And so we thought we would have a raffle. Everyone who has registered is in the bowl, and we have wonderful raffle baskets, the first of which we'd like to pick now. And we'll pick the last two at the end of the presentation. So it's important for you to stick around. This first raffle prize has wine from the Sunset Meadows Vineyard, chocolate from Thorncrest Chocolates, and a $50 gift certificate to Bridge Street Libations and Temptations in New Hartford. And the winner is Ann Bailey. Congratulations, Ann. Someone from the Women and Girls Fund will be contacting you so you can collect your prize. And now, our feature presentation. Our speaker, Ann Sharpsteen, is a best-selling author, an international speaker, and a consultant who speaks on topics of resilience, mindfulness, and living an inspired life. She has a special place in her heart for Victoria Woodhull, and she is online with us tonight to share details about her life. And if you have questions, I encourage you to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or to raise your hand if you have that option, and we will call on you at the end of the presentation. Ann?
All right, everyone. Sex, suffrage, and scandal is our topic today. 5 surprising facts about the first woman who ran for president of the United States, Victoria Woodhull. Now, if I were there with you in person in a room, I would want to see a show of hands. How many of you have heard of Victoria Woodhull? Because I predict a lot of you have not. And actually, I'm going to talk about why that is the case in our talk. But anyway, this is a rollicking look at a woman who she was quite scandalous during her time. The words sex and scandal in the title of this presentation are your first clue of what we're in for today, but it's all, it's not R-rated, I promise you. I will tell you, as Fran mentioned, I have a passion for Victoria Woodhull. My maiden name was Woodhull. And from a very early age, I've studied and researched her life, and I had an interest in learning kind of what made her tick and why she did what she did. So I'm thrilled that this year's Suffrage Centennial gives me an excuse to talk to people like you about Victoria and the rather wild woman that she was. So she's super interesting. So anyway, today I want us to go back in time 150 years ago to the Victorian era here in the US. So let's travel back in time. Now imagine the year is 1850. You are a woman. Let me tell you, you are taught that your role is to grow up, be married, bear children, be a mother, and submit to your husband. If you owned property before you got married, ownership of that property shifted to your husband after you married. If your husband had a right to access everything that a woman has, as well as her own body. There were no laws forbidding husbands from beating their wives. There were laws, however, that restricted how large of an object you could use when beating your wife. Seriously. If you attempted to flee an unhappy marriage, you probably would be captured and punished by the law. You were encouraged to avoid everything masculine, certainly never form friendships with men. The education that you received as a young woman was minimal. And your world was a world of few choices and submission on all fronts. So this is the setting for this woman that we're going to talk about, who was very much ahead of her time. She was the first woman to run for president, as we've said. Indeed, she ran for president when women didn't even have the right to vote. But I'll tell you, she did so much more in her life. She tirelessly fought for equal rights for women and Blacks too. Not many people know that. She was the first woman to open a brokerage firm on Wall Street, which was unheard of during Victorian times. She was the first woman to own and operate her own newspaper. She very strongly and very vocally supported the women's suffrage movement, of course. And by the way, she did live long enough to see women get the right to vote. And later in life, she did many, many other things. She single-handedly worked to save the ancestral home of George Washington in England, which I very much look forward to going and seeing. I think that would be wonderful. I'm going to show you some photos, by the way, at the end, some fascinating historical photos. So her name was Victoria Woodhull. She was a strong woman. She was a fearless woman. She was curious, bold, tenacious, and she was convinced that women could do anything. There is that saying, of women, let's see, what is it? Well-behaved women rarely make history. Well, she made history, as you will see. And she was rebuked by many during her time for being a scandalous woman who did not adhere to Victorian sensibilities. So her legacy, yes, is having helped the women's suffrage movement cross the finishing line. But I will tell you, her legacy is also of having been a woman who spoke her mind, who stood up for her beliefs, even when others believed that she should remain silent. She did not. She had an unshakable resolve to speak her mind and stand up for justice and fairness. And she was a fighter. She fought for the life that we women enjoy today. So this year, 2020, marks the 100-year anniversary of women finally winning the right to vote in this country. And I find it amazing that it's only been 100 years. And so I believe it's fitting that we celebrate her life and her work, wrapped in all the controversy as it was, as you will see. And I believe we should thank her for the work that she did before us. So buckle up, let's get ready. This is going to be a bumpy, crazy ride of a story. So let's get going. 5 surprising facts about the bold and colorful woman who was Victoria Woodhull, the first woman who ran for president of the United States. Okay, are you ready? Surprising fact number 1. Victoria started her career as a traveling clairvoyant. Now, hers was a rags to riches story. Victoria Claflin was born into a very poor family in rural Ohio, September 23rd, 1838, the sixth of 10 children. Now, from an early age, she was charming and she possessed a natural cleverness. Her family was very much looked down upon in her community. Her mother was illiterate. Her father was said to be a petty criminal. As a child, Victoria discovered that she could communicate with the dead and also heal the sick. And so her father, who was always on the lookout for a good money-making scheme, put her psychic abilities to work for money. Now, she had a sister with whom she was very close. The sister's name was Tennessee, like the state. Actually, it was Tenny Celeste, but she liked to be called Tennessee. And Tennessee accompanied Victoria as she traveled about and told fortunes and communicated with the dead and sold healing potions, everything, potions that would cure diseases ranging from cancer to asthma. Now, when Victoria was 15 years old, she was married off to a doctor, as was done during those times. Presumably, he was a good prospect, but soon he revealed himself to be an alcoholic and an abuser. So very sad. Now, at this time, she was now Victoria Woodhull. After she gave birth to a mentally challenged son and then a daughter, she divorced the husband, kept his name, and determined that she would never be abused again. Now, she continued to hustle and use her wits and her drive and her determination. And she turned this business of fortune telling and healing into a huge money-making scheme. She basically was building a fortune. And so as the money was rolling in, one night she had a dream. And in this dream, she saw a building in New York City, and it had an address. She had a specific address, and she felt a calling, a premonition that she was supposed to go there. And so she did. She and Victoria and Tennessee packed up and moved to New York City in 1868 following this calling. And she was certain that she would find fortune and good favor in New York City. Surprising fact number 2 about Victoria. Now, after moving to New York City, Victoria soon struck up a very close relationship with none other than Cornelius Vanderbilt. How many of you know who Cornelius Vanderbilt was? Of course, he's the railroad tycoon. He was one of the richest, if not the richest men in the country. And they started a close relationship. And some would say, wink, wink, close relationship. Now, Victoria and Tennessee both became acquainted with Cornelius when he hired Victoria for 2 things. Number 1, for medical healing. He distrusted traditionally trained medical doctors. And 2, he wanted to communicate with his dead wife. And he was so impressed with Victoria's psychic abilities that he began to consult her for financial advice. And I'll digress for a second and let you know, it's believed that Tennessee became Vanderbilt's lover, or maybe both of them, and that she may have even received a marriage proposal, but I digress. In any event, Vanderbilt was very devoted to the 2 sisters, supported the women financially and otherwise in all of their endeavors. And they decided to open up their own stockbrokerage firm named Woodhull, Claflin and Company, making them the first female stockbrokers on Wall Street. And indeed, the first women who ever dared to invade this male-governed domain in the financial district. And overnight, they became celebrities of huge, huge magnitude. And I want to paint this picture for you. So picture this. Each morning outside of their brokerage house, actually they were called banking houses back then, people would begin to gather along the curb, hoping to catch a glimpse of these two lady brokers, these two vivacious modern women. And at 10 o'clock sharp, an open carriage pulled by two white horses would briskly make its way down the street, and it would stop directly in front of Woodhull, Claflin and Company. And one account of this daily spectacle described the scene as this. The coachman in scarlet livery jumped down from his perch, opened the door of the carriage, and bowed low. The two occupants, Victoria and Tennessee, glanced with amusement at the throng as they waited for a path to be cleared. And then they gathered up their Dolly Vardens, their wonderful hats, and they swept majestically through the doors of the banking house. Now, inside the establishment, it was outfitted in sheer elegance. There were rich carpets that covered the lobby floors. There was ornate black walnut and chestnut furniture set about, glistening black marble countertops with silver buckets holding magnums of champagne. And then, of course, along one wall, some huge safes. Now, and beyond the lobby was their receiving room, where, of course, they conducted all of their business of stocks and gold. And then further beyond that was their private parlor, where a sign overhead read, "All gentlemen will state their business and retire at once." And so this was their life as financially they became extremely successful. Now, Victoria was often called the Woodhull. She was always fashionably attired. She was said to have a spring in her step. She was very loose and free in her manner around people, especially men. Men loved her. She was said to be very much a talker. The press at the time wrote in the magazine, wrote in the media about her that she could talk a blue streak from here to Christmas. And then, by the way, they did write about her quite a lot because, remember, she was this celebrity. And she was very daring when it came to conversation. And again, men especially liked that. And with all of the success that she was enjoying, I suppose it shouldn't surprise us that a woman who loves to talk, loves to share her opinion, and had money, she decided to start her own newspaper. And it was called the Woodhull and Claflin's Weekly. And by the way, while we're on the subject of Cornelius Vanderbilt, I will mention when Vanderbilt died a few years later and his children began fighting in court over his $100 million estate, rumor has it that Victoria and Tennessee were quietly paid off to not testify, and they moved to England. And we'll get to that here in a minute. But it was almost exactly 150 years ago today, in 1870, Victoria, at this time, she announced her candidacy for president of the United States. And as we've talked about, she didn't have a right to vote, but there was no law stating that she couldn't run. So here's how she did it. She organized what she called the Equal Rights Party. And the Equal Rights Party nominated her as a candidate for president at its convention. And she accepted, of course. And she also nominated for, as her running mate, was Frederick Douglass, the famed abolitionist. And Victoria and the Equal Rights Party, they were determined to combine the causes of women's equality and racial equality. And the recently, back then, the 15th Amendment had granted freed African-American slaves, men, the right to vote, but women of any race, we were still denied the right to vote. So here's what Victoria had to say about her announcement to run for president. She said, quote, "I am quite well aware that in assuming this position, I shall evoke more ridicule than enthusiasm at the outset." And she continued, "But this is an epoch of sudden changes and startling surprises." So she was a woman on a roll for justice and equality. Now, surprising fact number 3 about Victoria. She was the first woman to ever address Congress. Now, as you do when you move to a new town, Victoria, when she arrived in New York City, she got out and about and she started attending events in New York City. And she attended a female suffrage convention, and she became a devout believer in the cause and began to work tirelessly to further that agenda. And she leveraged this newfound celebrity status at this time into an invitation to testify before the House Judiciary Committee about the issue of women and the right to vote. So on January 11th, 1871, she argued before Congress that women already had the legal right to vote. And it's kind of interesting. I'll tell you, there were 3 points that she made. She said, first of all, the 14th Amendment was in place and addressed the rights of citizens and gave women equal protection of the laws. Secondly, she pointed to the 15th Amendment that granted newly freed African-American men the right to vote. And thirdly, under the Constitution's privileges and immunities clause, she said women are considered citizens, and a citizen who is taxed should have a voice in the subject matter of taxation. So what do you imagine was the response of her talk before Congress? Like, how do you think the congressman received her arguments? Well, she was soundly rejected. Her appeal to Congress, imploring for legislation for women, granting women the right to vote, was just flatly rejected. However, her appearance before Congress propelled her even further, if it were possible, into Victorian superstar status. This is ironic because we really don't hear much about her. And again, we're going to get to that and why. But Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, both publicly applauded Victoria for her pioneering efforts on behalf of women everywhere. Surprising fact number 4 about Victoria. Hope you're keeping up. Her campaign platform, as she ran for president, included advocating for free love and shorter skirts for women, among other things. This was, of course, shocking to Victorians of her time to speak of such intimate female topics. It was outrageous. Victoria often, though, spoke about sex on the lecture circuit, saying, among other things, that women should have the right to control their bodies at all times, control with whom they have sex, when to marry, who to love, how many people to love. I mean, free love was very encompassing. And here's what Victoria had to say about free love. She said, "Yes, I am a free lover. I have an inalienable, constitutional, and natural right to love whom I may, to love as long or as short a period, to change that love every day if I please. And with that right, neither you nor any law you can frame have any right to interfere." She also lectured about when women should hold back sex as a power ploy. And here's what she said about using sex to get what we women want. She said, "Let women issue a declaration of independence sexually and absolutely refuse to cohabit with men until they are acknowledged as equals in everything, and the victory will be won in a single week," she wrote. She also went on to say, "Rise and declare yourself free. Women are entirely unaware of their power. Like an elephant being led by a string, they are subordinated by those who are more interested in holding them in slavery. And if the very next Congress," she said, "refuses women all the legitimate results of citizenship, we shall proceed and call another convention expressly to frame a new constitution and to erect a new government." She said, "We mean treason, we mean secession, and on 1,000 times grander scale than was that of the South," she said. She said, "We are plotting revolution." So those were her words. And she had, like I told you, she wasn't a well-behaved woman. Now, To be fair, her platform also consisted of more reasonable, some would say more reasonable measures for labor reform, an 8-hour workday, welfare for the poor, regulation of monopolies. However, that didn't help. She was demonized in the press, quite literally, for espousing her views. And she was dubbed Mrs. Satan in a political cartoon in the popular Harper's Weekly. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's kind of like the People magazine or Time magazine of the Victorian era. And that name, Mrs. Satan, unfortunately, it stuck. And I'm going to show you actually a copy of that cartoon, but it basically depicts Victoria as the devil holding a scroll that read, be saved by free love. And then behind Victoria was a bedraggled woman carrying two children and an alcoholic husband. And she turns away from Victoria, obviously choosing a tortured, difficult path rather than associate with Victoria, or i.e. Satan. So surprising fact number 5 about Victoria Woodhull. She spent Election Day in jail. As Election Day approached, yes, there was more drama to unfold. She had published in her newspaper a salacious accusation against a very famous preacher at the time, who was a critic of her free love philosophy. He denounced it as vile and immoral, as many did. He was a Protestant preacher by the name of Reverend Henry Ward Beecher. And the accusations charged him with having an affair. Now, many newspapers, by the way, were talking about this story. It was a news story. Victoria's point was, despite preaching against free love, this preacher, in fact, practiced free love in his private life, and he was a hypocrite. And what Victoria did that was different than many of the other newspapers is she published many details about the affair. Let's just say more details than were considered appropriate. And the backlash was immediate. The preacher's posse of supporters made sure that Victoria was arrested and thrown in jail for sending indecent material through the mail. Of course, those details. And that's where she remained on Election Day. I will tell you, women who showed up to the polls on Election Day to vote for Victoria were also arrested. In the end, as we know, Ulysses S. Grant won the election, but Victoria did receive about 1,000 votes. And this is so interesting. It's in a very sad turn of events. The suffragist leaders who so wildly supported Victoria's efforts earlier, they eventually turned their backs on her. Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and the other leaders, they shunned Victoria over her political ambitions and for what they perceived as a love of the limelight. So sadly, when a comprehensive history of the women's suffrage movement was published in the 1880s, they essentially left Victoria out. And it has taken many, many years for historians to go in and resurrect really what Victoria did and her contributions. So because she was left out of that 1880s, accounting of the suffrage movement, that's why we don't hear about her. Now, after Cornelius Vanderbilt died in 1877, I alluded to the fact that Victoria and Tennessee left the US for England. And in England, Victoria met and married a wealthy banker and a philanthropist by the name of John Martin. But she continued to work diligently on behalf of women's suffrage. And she remained in England until her death in 1927, devoting her last remaining years to running another newspaper. And also she donated Soulgrave Manor, which was the home of George Washington's ancestors. She donated it to the Anglo-American Association, ensuring that it would be forever preserved. She died in her sleep at her home in Norton Park, Tewkesbury, at the age of 80. And the Morning Post in London eulogized her as follows. Quote, "There goes to her long rest a veteran who lived to see the triumph of a cause for which she was one of the first to contend. The younger generation knows not the indomitable leader to whom they owe so much. She it was who blazed the trail for those more insurgent leaders who finally won the victory." And this year in 2020, I ask that you think of Victoria and her boldness in fighting for equality for women. And let's honor her and her tenacity, her fearlessness, her determination, and quite frankly, her refusal to be silenced. These are qualities we can all use to make our world better. Other notable women who've changed the world also had those qualities. There was Rosa Parks, who tenaciously refused to give up her seat on that bus. There's Harriet Tubman, who fearlessly rescued others from slavery. Amelia Earhart, who boldly was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. Edith Wharton and Marie Curie, determined women, the first to win a Pulitzer Prize and Nobel Prize, respectively. There's Junko Tabei, the first woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest. And the list goes on and on. So I ask you, in what ways are you ready to be bold, to express your tenacity and your determination and your fearlessness? And in what ways do you need to use your voice? So in honor of Victoria and Rosa and Harriet and Amelia and Edith and Marie, let's be bold and determined and fearless. Perhaps 150 years from now, women will thank us if we do. And I want, if you will, I'm going to share my screen and share some photos with you. Let's see. Some fascinating photos. Hopefully everyone can see these. So this is my favorite picture of Victoria, by the way. And here she is. This is in an image that was photographed by Brady, the famous photographer who took so many Civil War photos. I just love this image of her. Here's a close-up. As you will see, she wasn't a natural beauty, but she was regal looking. Now, here's Victoria on the left, and there's Tennessee on the right. Tennessee was actually... she was believed to be the more beautiful of the two. She was heavier, I think back then, when women had a little more meat on their bones, it was considered more beautiful. And she is gorgeous. And Tennessee, by the way, when they had their brokerage firm, and this is about the time these photos were taken, Tennessee would opt to wear men's clothing, which of course was not typically done. And here's old Cornelius, who loved both of them and whose family had quite a problem with the relationship that he had with them. Here's a political cartoon for when they had their stock brokerage firm on Wall Street. Everyone knew who they were. There they are running the show on Wall Street. Here's another, this is another Brady photo. I love that. Here's their newspaper, Woodhull and Claflin's Weekly. This is when she announced her candidacy for president. Here's their tagline, progress, free thought, untrammeled lives, breaking the way for future generations. That's definitely true. Here she is campaigning. And she was very charismatic. And of course, look at all the men. They loved her. Remember, she got 1,000 votes. Oh, here she is speaking before Congress. I love this. I find this so interesting because you see all the women around her. Typically, you wouldn't find them on Capitol Hill. But all the suffragist ladies, they dropped everything on that day when they heard that Victoria was going to be speaking before Congress, and they all went there to listen to her and cheer her on. And that's, about the time they all, embraced her wildly and for helping them. There's another close up of her. Oh, there's that cartoon where she got the infamous name Mrs. Satan. A little bit closer look. There is Henry Ward Beecher, the preacher who was at the center of the scandal that wound her up in jail. This is her later on in life. I think she's just a beautiful woman. Here she is at the end of her life, towards the end of her life, and that's John Martin, the husband the banker who she married over in London. And this is the last known photo that we have of her. This is where she lived out the rest of her life in the UK. I would love to go there, see it. And this is her memorial. This is Soulgrave Manor, George Washington's ancestral home, which she saved. That's another must-see stop next time I go over there. Here's some shots inside. It's really remarkable. We just never hear about this. Oh, and I guess we're at the end. And here's how you can stay in touch with me. Here's my email, my cell, my website. I'm on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, look me up, and Instagram. And that's it. I give talks and workshops and some coaching. And if you want to talk about any of that, of course, you can get in touch with me. But that's it. So I would love to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Anne, for a wonderful presentation. It was really fascinating to learn more about Victoria Woodhull. And we do have 4 questions.
Oh, wonderful.
So I'd like to call on Kathi Weinstein. If Kathi, you'll have to unmute yourself to ask your question.
Oh, unmute. Am I unmuted?
You are.
Yes.
Okay. My first question had to do with their education. Were either of the sisters educated?
No, they were not. They didn't receive much of an education at all. They grew up poor. And of course, at a very young age, her father, got her out there peddling, making money for the family, telling fortunes. And I would say that she probably got an education through her mentor, Cornelius Vanderbilt. So if she did get any education, she got, a mentorship. She learned through the mentorship with him.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
My next question, I actually had a bunch of questions, but my next question had to do with her parents. I mean, how did they, especially probably her mother, how did they encourage her? I mean, when you have a daughter like that, in the Victorian times, did they encourage her to be her own woman, so to speak?
That's an interesting question. The family, her mother, by the way, it was very much a sort of a Jerry Springer kind of family. I mean, I hate to say because later in life, the mother actually tried to blackmail someone who was associated with Victoria, just to con them out of money. And so, I guess that's what I mean when I say it was kind of a Jerry Springer situation. So even when she had the fame and the money and she's in New York and she's newspaper running for president, she had these family members who were behaving badly and embarrassing her, and causing some problems. So, but she was loyal. She took care of, her family, I think up until the end. So she let them live with her and come to New York and move in. And she kind of paid for that a little bit. But I think they encouraged her to make money. you know, early on, and then they just sort of tagged along and took advantage. That, from my reading and research, that's pretty much the case.
It was interesting that you were talking about her throughout, but you mentioned once that she had children, and that was it. Whatever became of her children? Did they live long lives, or did they, you know, you mentioned one was mentally challenged.
Yeah.
Did they die early on, or?
He died fairly early on, but the daughter, Zula, she, you know, she was alive when her mother died, and she was by her mom's side. So she lived a long life. And she did, you know, remember she did have a husband that I didn't mention. Remember, she was married to the doctor Woodhull, who was,
and she divorced him. Yeah.
She divorced him. Then she married Colonel Blood, who, she ended up
hear about him.
Yeah, he kind of got lost in the shuffle. She divorced. No, he died. I'm sorry. But it's, at one point they were estranged, and she was, you know, she let the abuser, the doctor Woodhull, actually live with them all, you know, together. Wow. At one point she was married to Colonel Blood, and she had the ex-husband living with them too. She was very unconventional. But she was very loyal in that way. And I guess somehow maybe he was kind of like the mother, you know, you know, followed the money kind of thing. Then Colonel Blood died, and then she went to England and ended up marrying Martin, the banker.
Can you recommend, is there any book specifically written about her?
Yes, there are. And I normally have them with me, but I'll tell you what, maybe you can email Fran, and then send me, or reach out to, just somehow let's get in touch, and I'll send you the list of books, because there are some fascinating books. Wonderful. About her.
Because there aren't many. You've piqued my interest, and I'm sure that I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of the women that are listening to this, and we are probably all clamoring to learn more about her. She sounds wonderful.
Oh, I know. There was supposed to be a Netflix movie being produced, and it was supposed to be out, I think, in 2017, but obviously something happened.
Right.
So I'm just waiting. I know when they make a movie about her, it's going to be a blockbuster, because she's so fascinating.
Wonderful. Well, you've been delightful, Anne. Truly delightful. And I don't want to jeopardize the question, so somebody else could ask.
Thank you for those great questions, Kathi. We do have another question from Catherine Brooks. Catherine, can you unmute yourself and talk? I guess Catherine is unable to unmute herself right now. Can we go to Susan Carroll? Susan has raised her hand.
Hi, Anne.
Hi.
What a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I enjoyed it. I was wondering about the other name on the Wall Street firm. Was that Tennessee's last name?
It was. That was her maiden name, Claflin. Okay. She was born Victoria Claflin. So that was for Tennessee. And by the way, Tennessee went on to marry someone else and later in life. But
okay. Yeah. And how did you get interested in this topic?
Well, so my maiden name is Anne Woodhull, and it's so funny because the Woodhull family, you know, would always say, well, I learned about Victoria Woodhull because she was a Woodhull. And it's funny because some of the family would always remind me, now remember, she married into the family. She's not a true Woodhull, you know, so it's like, even today, she's still a little bit scandalous. And so I just became fascinated. And so at a very young age, and there wasn't much material, you know, I'm 55. So there wasn't a lot of material on her. And even over the years, there's still not, you know, a great deal there. But I started looking and collecting things, and you know, you can go on eBay and you can type in Victoria Woodhull, and you can find like newspaper clippings, where there are accounts of hers. And I'm telling you, ladies, buy those because they're going to become collectibles someday. I believe when more people learn about her.
Thank you.
We have another question from Dona Clark. Donna, can you unmute yourself?
Did it work?
Yes, it did.
Yes.
Yay. So my question was, what happened to Tennessee? Did she move to England with Victoria? Did they live the rest? It seems like such a nice sisterly bond that they had all these adventures together.
They stayed very close. She went on to marry, and she became, I will tell you, it's actually kind of interesting because, how do I explain this? Victoria, they both sort of, were very scandalous, and, these women who were unconventional, that's maybe the best word, unconventional women. They became more conventional as they got older. Maybe that's happens with a lot of unconventional women. I don't know. But she actually fell in love and had a very happy marriage. She remained very close with Victoria. They did have a very close bond, and that remained through the years. She was, it's funny, they had a very, very close relationship, and it seems to me to be very healthy relationships.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is from Robin Magistrali. Robin, can you unmute yourself?
Okay.
There you are. Yep.
There I am.
Hi, Robin.
Hi there. Yeah, I agree with everybody else. It really is a fascinating talk. She's quite a woman. I'm really curious about her running mate, or how Frederick Douglass reacted to being her running mate. And did they have any kind of an agenda that both spoke about the rights of freed slaves, Black people in general, in addition to women?
That's such a brilliant question, because this is fascinating. There's no evidence that they ever campaigned together. And there's really no evidence that he knew he was being nominated as her running mate. So there's no evidence of him talking about being her running mate. He was definitely, he was on the ballot, and it was announced, and there was talk about it, but we don't know if there's nothing to tell us whether he was thrilled with that idea, or he thought it was ridiculous, or, that he even accepted the nomination, but he was on the ballot.
Great. Our next question is from Rena Claybart. Rena, can you unmute yourself?
I was curious about the children that she had, and whether they went on to do anything spectacular, or did she have any other involvement with them?
She loved her children dearly. The daughter, of course, the son had serious health issues, but the daughter lived a long life and was very devoted to her mother, and was with her, to the end. And she didn't, do anything noteworthy like her mother, but yeah. So yeah, she didn't do anything. The daughter didn't do anything noteworthy, but she was just. Sorry, there was a problem with the app. Oh, I don't know what that. Does anybody hear that, or is it just me?
Yeah, no, I can hear it, but I don't know what it is.
I don't know where it's coming from.
Oh, wow.
But no, the answer is no. The daughter didn't ever do anything noteworthy, you know, other than be a society, you know, she mingled in society along with her mother.
So we're going to try Catherine Brooks one more time. I think that she'll be able to come on now. Catherine, can you unmute yourself? Catherine, are you there?
She's trying, probably.
Yeah. She has a really interesting question. Would it be okay for me to read it?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
She said, the way Victoria ingratiated herself to Vanderbilt is somewhat reminiscent of how Rasputin gained the trust of the Russian court. Was she a keen manipulator or was there real love?
I think that she was an opportunist. I think she was very smart. And no, I don't think she was a Rasputin-y kind of figure. I think that she enjoyed people and she connected with people, and who knows? I mean, I guess he obviously was convinced that she had psychic abilities and began to, you know, go to her for advice. There are some accounts though where he tipped them off on some deals to do, and you know, they made like $700,000 from, you know, by doing this one deal, which is an enormous amount of money, you know, back then. So I think there was some give and take, and there was, you know, I think he probably was the kind of man who liked unconventional women, and he obviously took their advice and had some success from it. And so he, in kind, helped them get ahead as well. But no, I don't think she was an evil kind of figure. I think she was super smart and savvy and, you know, ahead of her time. And she was not afraid to speak her mind and say, you know, what she thought. She was not afraid to go toe to toe with men and behave as an equal. You know, women, we weren't supposed to do that, you know, back then. We were supposed to be submissive, and being forward and going toe to toe with men was very sort of masculine. I guess it still is, you know, considered very, very masculine energy. And she definitely, you know, had that, but I don't think at all I never get the impression she's an evil, you know, manipulative figure. I think she took advantage of, you know, she's an opportunist.
Yes, but as I think about all of your comments, and it was such a fascinating presentation. And where did she find that in herself? Where did she first discover that she could stand up for whatever she wanted to, would say whatever she wanted to, make her opinions known? Do you think it was those very early times of being brought around and people listening to her as a clairvoyant?
I think probably so. Because obviously she commanded the attention of a lot of people at an early age by sharing, you know, what she thought. So I think that's an interesting observation. And that's probably where it did come from. It certainly didn't come from having a nurturing, healthy upbringing family, you know.
No, it sounds like she learned to rely on herself early on.
Yeah. You know, like Tiger Woods, he had a coach, you know, like a sports coach, you know, at a young, you know, he had someone helping him be the winner that he eventually, you know, became. She didn't have anything like that. All she had was, you know, she just learned early on that if she used her wits and her determination, she could make money. And she really followed her gut, having that dream. I mean, have any of us had a dream where we, you know, pursued it? And to that extent, pick up and you know, see an address and then move your whole family, you know, to another city. She was, you know, it was a little bit out there. But she followed her heart, or whatever you want to call it. and just felt like things would always unfold, you know, the way that they should. And
yeah, there seems like there was something to her clairvoyance. She knew what to do ahead of time.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, there's a question from Brooke McIntyre Tooley. Brooke, can you unmute yourself?
Sure. So I think that's an interesting conversation you were having. I have a grandmother and a grandfather who were carnival. So it sort of falls in line with that. You learn about people by watching them and picking up on cues. And but her clairvoyance probably served her well. What I wanted to know was there anything written about how she made decisions about the investments? And you answered that a little bit when she was getting some insider training, but all trading insight. And then whatever happened became, or what became of the Wall Street firm?
You know, that's so interesting that you asked that, because years ago I was working in TV news and I had a reason to go to New York City for NBC network. And I actually had the address of where that firm was. Mm-hmm. And I went to try to track it down and I couldn't find it. But, I mean, I knew within a couple of buildings where it was, but the numbers had all changed, I guess. And, I don't know whatever happened to it, and I couldn't even find the physical location, which disappointed me so much. I also tried to find the address that she had in that dream, and I was successful in finding that address. And I thought it was so interesting because I wondered if those steps that I saw were the steps that she, you know, stepped on. I'm just such a junkie for history. So it was, you know, fascinating to think that she went through those doors, you know, that's where she was called to go. And yeah, but a lot of people think it's really weird that, you know, that she was, you know, a scandalous woman. I can tell you I've been married before, you know, I was married and I'm divorced now. And my husband, you know, thought it was very odd to have an interest in this woman who was a clairvoyant and you know, really didn't approve of my interest in Victoria Woodhull because it's just not proper, you know.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
so when I went to go try to find her, you know, where those addresses were in New York, you know, he wasn't very happy with me. So, anyway.
Oh, well.
Thank you.
Any last questions for Anne before we move on to, Susan Carroll has a question. Susan, can you unmute yourself?
No, I already asked it, but thank you.
Oh, okay. I thought you had another. But thank you. Thank you for your participation. And this has been so delightful. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your presentation. It's really excellent work, excellent research. And I so admire your passion for history and your desire to learn more about women and your dedication to women's causes. As you know, that runs deep at the Women and Girls Fund.
Yeah. I love what you do, by the way. So I encourage everyone, please, who's attending, you know, support the Women and Girls Fund. I love what they do. And of course, I'm passionate about women and helping women. And so, yeah, thank you for being here. And if anyone wants to get a hold of me, you can reach out to Fran.
Yes, we're happy to pass your name along, and great praise for your work.
Thank you.
So if we could turn our attention now to the other two thank you baskets. I'd like to show you basket number 2 with the help of our tech people. And in that basket, there's a bottle of red wine from Jerem Winery. There's a gift certificate for $25 to the Village Restaurant, a bottle of Vermont maple syrup, a bag of honey nut granola from Stonewall Kitchen Products, pumpkin spice quick bread mix, 1 jar of maple pumpkin butter, New England corn chowder mix, 1 turkey brine kit, 1 bottle of pumpkin jam from Portugal, a bottle of spreadable honey, and a package of chocolate pecan biscotti. Who is going to be the lucky person who gets that? Here we go. Choosing the winner. and that is Kelsey Care. Kelsey will be in touch and get you all these lovely presents. And now if we could see basket number 3. Basket number 3 has Oktoberfest Lager 4-pack from Half Full Brewery, salsa, a jar of salsa from Gresick Farms in New Hartford, tortilla chips, sea and salt, 1 bag, Good Company Coffee House $25 gift certificate, Peaches and Cream ice cream gift card for $25, and 10 free lessons at Lam Yoga in New Hartford. Wow, that's a great gift package, as are they all. And thank you so much to the donors who provided those special presents for us. Even though we didn't sell raffle tickets, we wanted to have them for you as a special thank you for supporting us in this, our first virtual event. And this event goes to Connie Hotchkiss. Congratulations, Connie. So this is the end of our event. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about all of the people at the Women and Girls Executive Board who work so hard to make these things happen. Our chair is Sandra Zielinski. Kathy Kinane is our secretary. Rachel Tway-Grant is our treasurer. Judy Armstrong and Dolores Ramo put together those lovely raffle prizes. So thank you very much for that. We also have Allison Bannerman, Tammy Casey, Barbara Doogie, Kathy Mink, Candy Perez, Kathi Weinstein, Tarina Smith, Jane Williams, and me, Fran Stoffer. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us tonight, and good night.
Night, everyone.